Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for joining in our last day of Catalyzing Change Week. We are very thrilled to have you all here. And we are going to have 1 hour session talking about system change that is going to be led by Gisela Solimos, Debbie Brock, and Ana Claudia Gonzalez, who is going to be joining us in a couple of minutes. I hope that you enjoy it. And I'll give the floor to Gisela.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. I don't know if some good evening. I woke up today at 5 a.m. to participate in a session in India. It was very, very exciting, Catalyzing Change Week. So I don't know where you all are based. I'm Gisela Solimos. I'm based in Brazil. And I am a social entrepreneur, the co-founder of CREM, which is a center to recover malnourished children. I hope this doesn't bother the view you have from my screen. CREM was founded, I'm the co-founder, and we started it in 1993, so it's been 30 years now. And we started treating undernourished children and then obese children as well. And we do this in different ways. We have day hospitals, two day hospitals in São Paulo and one in Maceió, Alagoas. We have an outpatient clinic. We do works in the community. We develop different projects like in different places in Brazil, also in Latin America, and so on and so forth. Why I'm sharing this with you? Because and these you have some of the numbers. Sorry, because they are in Portuguese. I didn't have the English version of them, but I will lead you through this. So we have like assisted more than 160,000 children, adolescents that were malnourished, and we have reached more or less almost 8 million people because of the trainings we do, fathers and especially professionals. And these trainings, therefore, are replicated in their actions, in the way they deal with the problem. And also, we are connected to the university and do scientific work and have got very interesting discoveries about what is malnutrition and how we treat it in such a way that we have broken some paradigms. That is not the subject of our session also, but if you're interested, I can share in the Q&A session. But doing all this, and originally I am a psychologist, but and got involved with nutrition and poverty. But doing all this and going deeper in trying actually to solve the problem, what we realize, what we discover is that malnutrition is a very, very, very complex problem, and involving it's wrong here, micro and macro elements of different aspects: health, social aspects, psychological aspects, and political aspects, from the industries and so many things. And so since the beginning, this work led me to think, well, but we do need to do some kind of work that approach this macro system and to understand it. One day I was approached by this lady. She's Denise Shire. This was in 2014. And she has this company called Novos Urbanos. And she came to me saying, oh, you know, I'm starting a lab of social innovation, and we are studying food and nutrition system in Brazil. And you are, and your institution, you guys are important stakeholders in this ecosystem. So I'd like you to join our lab. I mean, she came out of the blue. It took me a while to understand. But to make a long story short, what she was proposing to me was to take part in a laboratory of social innovation in food and nutrition that was based on Theory U. Theory U is a methodology idealized by Otto Scharmer. He's a professor of MIT. And the idea is a social technology of collective learning that aims to prepare leaders for current challenges and which involve the well-being of the planet and future generations. So it's a systemic social change methodology. And how does this happen? Sharma used to start his presentation saying, we have a problem. We are here at the beginning of this U. We cannot solve the problem with the same mindset we have, because whatever solution we do without changing, without seeing more deeply the problem, the solution will not be an actual solution. We won't actually solve the problem. So he proposes a pathway that he called U because of the shape of it. So he says, oh, let's start gathering together and expliciting our common intent and listening to the others and to what life is calling you to do. Let's observe what is outside of us, what is there outside in the environment, with other players, and connect with people and places to sense the system as a whole. Let's connect here in the bottom of the U, let's connect it to ourselves, to our source of inspiration, and where do we want to be. And then after that, and we have all these elements, we are able to start prototyping, co-creating potential solutions, and then co-evolving and embodying the solutions in the ecosystem. So the aim of this lab was to do that. And it was a one-year journey. Denise was able to gather 35 influencers of the system of nutrition and food and nutrition in Brazil that were the body of knowledge of the lab. We had a process of downloading the information we had and to know the reality, the real reality of the system, and therefore see the integrality of the system of nutrition and food in Brazil. Here on the right side of the slide, you see the names of the people that were engaged. And basically we had associations dealing with organic agriculture, associations in the slums of São Paulo. São Paulo is a massive city with 12 million people living here. So, and we have slums like with 300,000 people. So we brought leadership from the slums. We had big companies like Coca-Cola and PepsiCo. We had banks, Itaú. We had grassroots movements like Movimento do Sem Terra, Without Land movement, university, and the government, the city, the representatives of the city of São Paulo, and more or less that's. So it was a very varied ecosystem, many different people. And we started in December 2014 at this farm of Pedro Paulo Diniz, who he received this farm that was, the land was more or less destroyed because of the way people would raise cattle in the farm. And he recovered the whole land and implemented an organic farm. So we were there enjoying and experiencing all this. And Otto Scharmer came and conducted the whole process. And so some things were important in this process. We had to be there as individuals, like me, like as Gisela, and not as the director of my institution, because this would allow us to connect and have real dialogues. We also need an openness to collaborate and therefore to think and to freely engage in actions for change, to articulate and prototype new solutions. One very important, so how this process happened. We were together, we were influencers, we called experts to give us inputs, scientific inputs, political inputs, inputs of the ecosystem that was outside of us, and therefore we were helped to see what was the knowledge that would emerge from this. And what happened? We did build a map that is that wanted to show this ecosystem. I'm going to show each one of these small parts of the map for you, but this is the environment of food and nutrition that we were able to know and describe. And one thing is that the first issue is that we realize that malnutrition, especially obesity, is an invisible problem. Mothers, families don't realize that the child is sick. However, obesity isn't a chronic disease and is the main cause of the non-communicable diseases, the NCDs, like cancer, heart diseases, hypertension, and so on and so forth. And is the cause of 72% of the deaths in Brazil. And half of our population is obese now. The other element is publicity. Publicity is shapes the way we eat and the way we consume products, especially food. And the other combined with the detachment of the place where I live because of the massive urbanization process, we have lost our food identity. So in the countryside, we were used to eat certain types of foods. Now in the big cities, we don't have access to those fresh foods anymore. And so we listen to publicity and we engage when we start eating ultra-processed foods. And also food starts to be like escape from problems, like a comfort. I look for comfort in food, and it's difficult to have access to fresh food in the slums, and so on and so forth. The other thing is that as people came to cities and women need to go out to work, they stay outside home like 12 hours per day because they need to commute, like at least 2 hours to go and to come back from their work. They work a lot, and therefore they don't have time to prepare fresh fruit. Also, access to food in their regions is very poor. It's what we call food deserts, and so this also was another issue. The production, the agriculture, how the food is produced, and although the familiar agriculture responsible for 80% of the food we eat in the country, they occupy only 24% of the area that is used to produce food. So also another problem is how we distribute this food, how this food gets to people to everybody in a equal way. And finally, industries, they have worked a lot, invested tons of money to produce foods that are addictive. And so we get addicted to certain types of food. And now, so this is the role of the industry, and what do the industry want to do with that? It was very interesting. So this was the knowledge we got from the system, and we exchanged experience, visited each one's in their work. And some things came out. For instance, in one of the slums, one of the leaders, community grassroots leaders there, started to build like a garden to produce vegetables in an organic way inside the school, and started a whole movement to do nutritional education with this organic food for those kids. Another leadership started a restaurant with fresh and organic food also inside the slum, in order to start changing the culture how this is done. Or the person who was responsible for the meals served in schools in the city of São Paulo. Every day, the city of São Paulo serves 2.3 million of meals for their students. And this person started to buy organic rice from Movimento Sem Terra, from Without Land movement, which was a very, very interesting connection as well. And we And we also, produced, there was also the production of a very interesting documentary. I think Anna has already put it on the chat for you, that gives the sense, it's very, very interesting, that gives the sense of how is the system and where we have problems, but also where we have, it shows very interesting potential solutions for some of the issues. So I'm stopping here. Now, I don't know if Claudia has already entered, but the idea is that she will comment this experience now. I can't see you, so I need someone to.
So since Claudia actually is in another session at the same time, we absolutely love Catalyst. We do this quite often, but she'll be in just a quick moment. I want to go ahead and see if there's any questions to Gisela about the systems change, the work that they've done. And what we wanted to do is set you up with this example of systems change. Anna Claudia is going to talk through the systems change, and then we're going to apply it to Catalyst 2030. So I want to open it up to the room. Do you have any questions about the organization or anything that Gisela talked about?
I'm not sure if I was able to be very clear, but I'm just sharing a little bit of the experience. For me, it was a changing experience in order to be able to see the system as it is. I had many intuitions, but these intuitions became super clear in this experience, and it was life-changing for many of us. For instance, there was one person in Coca-Cola, and she said, with this lab that lasts for a whole year, we would meet every 2 months, a whole weekend. She said, here I learned I need to talk to my enemy, and her enemy was the university, because the university was, yes, the university is the place where people would do their researches and would say, oh, but this is wrong. What you industries are doing, there are tons of papers showing the bad consequences of the ultra-processed food that industries produce, and how obesity has increased and so on and so forth. And the fact that we were able to be there as individuals, and we were able to let go our institutional roles, allowed us to connect. And she actually one day went to university and spent like 3 hours talking to this professor and listening all the critiques the professor had to everything the industry was doing. So this experience showed me that to start that mindset, openness, connection, and mindset, they're absolutely fundamental for us to start thinking new solutions, because each one of us, we need to see the role we play in the whole system. So we had Claudia is here. I'm just finishing this idea. So we had was part of the process to visit one another organizations, and I had a whole team of directors of Coca-Cola to interact with my super obese children. We had children of 2 years old children with hepatic fat liver, and they would say, oh, but I mean, that's not because of us. And the kids would say, I love Coca-Cola. I drink like 1 or 2 liters a day. So, Claudia.
Wow. Let me ask one quick question before we go. Brenda had asked, are the local people involved in the work that you're doing? The citizens, the local citizens, of course.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So here is very difficult because this is a massive city, but one of our centers is in the slum, and we have the whole engagement of community there, but also the families, we have workshops with them, a whole educative and interactive way of doing their work.
And one last question from Michael, when we're in the session and Claudia is going to be speaking, if you can share your research articles on it, he would love to see those. So if you could put those in the chat.
Okay, I'll share the website link because it's 150, and there you go in publicações. Unfortunately, it's just the articles are in English, but this website is in Portuguese, publicações, and you can find them. Okay, I'm gonna put on the chat. Claudia,
Wonderful.
over to you. I'm gonna share my screen. Or do you want to share, Claudia? You can do it.
No, if you can help me. Hello, everyone. And I'm very, very glad to be here. I was trying to be a bit of or feeling what gods feel on about being in two places at the same time, and definitely I'm not God, so I just jumped from another session to here, and I would like to start to say that the question that we heard the most when we are talking about systems change is, and now what can we do? And this question is recurrent, and people ask from a place of, we want to go to the field and we want to implement, and we don't know how to do it. It's not clear what do we need to do to really implement. There are a lot of studies, there are a lot of theory, but now that we reach this point of the U, how can we close the U? Okay, and this question arises because systems change is a continuous process. It's a cycle. It's a spiral. It's a spiral that start with these sensing and learn, connect, recognize, explore, or prototyping, but then it goes on. It doesn't end in the point of prototyping. We need to go further and find the leveraging points and really act synergically in those points. And then we need to think how to sustain this process in the time by building a backbone. Then we need to develop commitment among everyone that is involved. We need to act, then we need to measure. And this measurement is not a measurement that is to find what went wrong. It's to find where we are and integrate the feedback. It's much more a perspective of a feed forward than a feedback. Is let's understand where we are and how this process is happening until now, and let's integrate and define the new cycle. And so this is why we hear these questions so much, and we hear in different points. It's very interesting because sometimes people are connecting and they don't know what do I need to do now that I'm connecting with my deeper purpose. Now what can we do? Or people are leveraging, and then what can we do? They found the leveraging points, they have a beautiful map, they understood the problematic, they understood the solution, they identify all that, and then they ask, and now what can we do? So these questions are very normal, and that's why it's so important to open spaces to share experience and allow people to express these questions. Let's see in the concrete case that Gisela shared with you. Next slide, Gisela, please. Can you, yeah. There we go. So the key points of this case, we see this case have done a lot of great things that are very difficult. The first one is to have a very representative core group, and they had this great job of sitting in the same table, the goods and the bads. the good guys and the bad guys. In this case, the bad guys were Coca-Cola, PepsiCo. But normally, when we are doing system change, we have these, we find that it's very difficult to sit the bad guys in the same table as we are. Actually, the bad guys are never, we are never the bad guys. The bad guys are the others, okay? But the other guys that are the bad ones, they are critical to define a solution. They are in, we can identify, okay, those guys are the problem, but to define a solution, we need them to build a collective solution with them. Otherwise, our efforts will not work at all, because we are not involving everyone that needs to be involved. We need to share a purpose, and they made that in the case. They achieved this shared purpose. They involved all the voices. So after they constitute the core group, they go to the researchers, they go to the specialists, they asked and involved more people. So we used to say those are the ever expanding circles of embracing the question, and they made that. They were focused on prototyping. That is really important to do. And they stop in there. And what is next? What they need to do next? They need to, you saw the 6 areas that Gisela shared with you. They find out these 6 key areas that are related with the problem, and now they need to build up and understand what are the dynamics between those 6 areas to find the leveraging points where to act and influence the most the behavior of the system. So that is the leveraging part. Then they need to build up a backbone that allow this group to have an identity that is separate from each of the organizations that constitute this group. So they need to have a backbone, and it's very interesting. If you see and imagine what is this backbone? We are immersed in a concrete example. Catalyst has this backbone. And why Catalyst can move as a movement is because when Catalyst was created, people thought about having a backbone. The secretariat, the groups like Debbie and others that are coordinating different areas. They are not members separate from these backbones. They are part of the movement, and they are part of these backbones. So Catalyst in itself, it doesn't have to be a formal organization. Catalyst in itself, it doesn't have a formal organization, but has the backbone. So that is something that is critical to sustain the process along the time. Then we need to ensure commitment, because we will need people from each of these organizations to come together and form teams around the leveraging points and build a strategy to each of those leveraging points. Then we need to act, measure, integrate learnings, and restart the cycle. So that is the point here, how what Gisela shared connects with this process that is a continuum. In the next slide, Gisela. So, and what we need to understand is that most of the organizations, they live still in a traditional approach. They do not think in terms of systems, and they not act in terms of systems. We can say that about 75% of the organizations, they have a linear thinking and a linear action. And this linear thinking and linear action were valid and very useful to bring us to where we are, but they are not useful to move us forward. So we need to change. And 15% of the organizations, they start to thinking in a systems terms, but they are using tools still that were designed based in a linear process. So they think in systems, but they use tools that are linear and made them lost the thinking and the systemic vision. Then we have a small group of 7% of the organizations that, sorry, they start to have this systems change approach. They start to think systemically, they start to act systemically, they use the tool, and they can work in their organization, but they start to work.
No problem, no. Next step will be there. Yeah, you're renovating.
Is it possible, folks, to mute yourself? Yeah, great. Thank you. So what I was here sharing with you, these organizations that are using the systems change approach, they are working in their organizations and they start working in their ecosystem, their direct ecosystem, with providers, with clients, with partners, maybe with some regulators, and they are starting to move towards these approach, the systems change approach. Then we have 3% that are focused on systemic impact. And these organizations, they go further. They work with their ecosystem and with the whole society. So it's a bit more extensive, their action, and they are focused on the impact they are generating. So this is an understanding that we need to have to understand why most of the organization want to understand and have difficulties in understanding a systems approach. So we need to move towards these groups. And thank you, Gisela. When we are talking about systemic impact, we are talking about also about a management model, a systemic management model, a model that is adaptive and evolving management process, and where we start by making understanding of the problem, a systems analysis of the problem, a systems analysis of the solution, a systemic value proposition. So we need to rebuild the value proposition of the group. We need to move from theory of change to a theory of systems change, where we incorporate in our theory of change all the thinking of systems. We need to define KPIs, not the process KPIs, but the impact, the systemic impact KPIs, to understand how our transformation is happening and how can we learn from the process. And then we need to have a strategy that ensure resilience. And this strategy that ensure resilience is a strategy that involved sustainability, involved governance, involved partnerships, involved marketing and communications. So those are points that allow us to build resilience of this process. And we can move on, please. So briefly, the big principles of systemic impact that are in the base of everything that we were sharing until now is we have these 6 main principles. First, it's all about systems dynamics. It's all about dynamics between people And because systems are made of people, they are made of organizations, and organizations are made of people. So when we say let's change the system, is change the people's behavior. It's change people's behavior that will allow to change the dynamics, that will allow to have different results. So it's all about systems dynamics. Then we need to align and co-create with the accountable agents where we have the goods and the bads. Otherwise, it doesn't work. The third principle is we need to build or rebuild systems that are functional. They systems that allow people to connect, allow people to have good decision-making processes, and allow them to take collective action. The fourth principle is we need to apply a systemic managing model. We cannot do all this process with a traditional managing model. We need to involve different entities, and even inside of our organization, we need to involve different groups, different levels, to design and measure and evolve in the process. Then we need to adapt to our concrete systems conditions. It doesn't work copy and paste. There is no recipe. We are talking about people, and people are different. People are in different stages of evolution. So systems are in different stages of evolution. And when we want to work with a system, we need to understand where the system is. And then, understanding the principles of systemic impact, we need to adapt our action to those systems. And finally, we need to move from our ecosystem work towards a collective transformation, and a collective transformation that goes further from our agenda and goes to these broader purpose that is serving the community, serving the society, serving the other. And it's very interesting because when we do all these, interestingly, the results, the traditional results, are much higher than if we don't do this. And that is really interesting. In the next slide, I have here, I want just to share one other case, and this is because Gisela asked me, there are other cases where folks did close the U and start, they went all the way around. And I said, yeah, there are several, and you can find those cases in the site of the Institute for Strategic Clarity, where I'm a board member. And I bring here a case that is the Build Upon case that we worked with. And we start with identifying the stakeholders. We had 14 countries that come together to define a strategy to renovate the building stock in Europe. And in this group, we had the constructors, we had the environmentalists, we have the advocates of the European Union, we have the ones that produce the materials to build the houses and insulation and so on. So we start with them, with this group, working all together to connect with the deeper purpose that unite all these groups. So we have goods and bads in the same table, and we work with them to find this common purpose. Then we work with them in training them in collaborative processes. So we went to Cambridge in this case, and with representatives of all these countries and those organizations, we train them to collaborate. And in this collaboration, we start to define the problem. we start to define collectively the solution. We made here a high-level map, and we identify the leveraging points. We build up the teams that were designing specific strategies to each of the leveraging points, and we define a measuring system that allowed us to understand how the process was going. And this is not about the traditional KPIs that we are used to. It's not about having 135 indicators. It's about to have 15, 20 indicators. We are talking here about 12 indicators. And those 12 indicators are key to understand how our transformational change is happening. So this is a case that went all around. Interestingly, build upon is now in the, it calls now build upon 2, and it calls 2 because they are doing the same the second time. So they go around the second time with a broader intention, a broader capacity to act. So you have here, you can find more about this case in the link in there. And finally, I will just finish by letting you know that I'm here representing the Action for Systemic Impact. In the next slide, Gisela, if you can help me. And Action for Systemic Impact is a space where professionals and practitioners can come together and experiment and have the possibility of asking questions, share knowledge, build up a peer learning group. And we act in strategic support, in ecosystems innovation, capacity building. So join us. We have here some initiatives that are completely for free. You have the clinics, where we have clinics in several languages, in English, Portuguese, and Spanish. And you can just register there and come with your concrete questions, and we will share our time together in there. Thank you so much.
Debbie,
I know,
think
I got it. What we'd like to do is go ahead and share this example with Catalyst 2030. And I'll do it very quickly because we do want to make sure we have time for Q&A. If you do have questions, please do put them in the chat, and then that way we'll have them as a holding ground and be ready to bring them back when we have time for the Q&A piece. The third piece of this session we wanted to make sure we did was to have everyone understand how this applies to Catalyst 2030 as a model. And you'll see this really intense collaboration that happens within Catalyst, and using our approach. We've got those 3 pillars of Catalyst. So when we look at our systems level change, which is our ultimate goal, is developing this enabling environment for social entrepreneurs to flourish. So we know that our social entrepreneurs have to collaborate and work together to do this important work. And that's also including our key stakeholders. So working with governments. If you remember Wednesday, one of the ministers from India said, I'm going to take the social innovation economy to the G20. Whoa, huge win, lots of cheering in the background with Catalyst. And so to do systems level change, people have to understand this important work. It can be governments, it could be the private sector with businesses, the way we work with our funders and shifting our funding paradigm. If we see a systemic change in the way that the grantees grantors trust their organizations, give 3-year unrestricted grants, and that we can adapt and change in our models based on what we're learning, that's going to be much more impactful than the way that the funding model is working now. The second piece, this collaboration, most of you are very involved with Catalyst. We know collectively, if we work together, we're going to learn so much more and accomplish so much more. So when you look at that Theory U model, they really embrace this collaborative action. And then the third part is the learning piece. we have to facilitate this systems change learning and have that systems change learning ecosystem. I apologize. I like what Claudia had said about, I think it was 75% of people are in this linear thinking mode, and we need to move into the systems thinking mode and ultimately into the systems change approach. And a lot of us are still in that introductory phases. And it's not until you really start digging into this work and doing this work and listening to everyone else that you can really start shifting systems. But we all know it takes a lot of work. The next piece that we're going to talk about is how the systems approach and how we approach systems. The next one, Gisela. When we look at it from what Giroux likes to talk about is there's 3 key systems. And the first piece of the system is we have to change the system linked to ourselves. And I think that's number 1 for us, is that people really have to start with themselves. And you'll see as we're more involved with Catalyst and we learn more, we see our own behavioral shifts. We see that our dominance, culture, biases are shifted, or you can see how we interact with each other has changed. So that's the first thing. So we start with self and our mindsets and behaviors. The second one is the systems connected to change. And so that's the systems around us. So our community, our local community. So we start with the local community and move out regionally, nationally. And then the third one, to really do this ecosystem change, systems level change, that's the highest level. And, it looks like the iceberg at the bottom there, that we really are able to do this great change. Do a couple of quick definitions here, which when on the next slide, which is when Gisela was talking about this, is, we know that we're addressing these systems, right, from the systematic view. But that second part of really understanding and transforming the policies, practices, and power dynamics is that if we do those policy changes, so for example, in Europe, there's competency centers, social entrepreneurship competency centers, and they're piloting this and doing intensive research on this in 37 countries in Europe. And it was 37. And so, and from that learning, they're going to adjust and try to have these centers of social innovation in every one of the governments in Europe. That would be huge. Okay. But the other piece when we talk about social norms and mindsets is that behavioral change. When Gisela was talking earlier about making sure that, the people and their nutrition and the behavioral changes that we need to have, that we have to understand things better. We have to change the way the social norms are in the community, understanding of nutritional challenges. And, the soda example is a good one. But if you live in poverty, you look for the cheapest meal, which might not be the healthiest meal. And then that causes you more expenses in family health care, et cetera. And one more click, and then we'll go to the next one. That bottom click here, little summary here is collaborative action, diverse set of actors, again, local, regional, global level. The slide that I want to talk about is just making sure that when we do the systems level work, one more click, Gisela, thank you. One more. And I know I love my slides. Click, click, click for Debbie. But if you look at the principles of Catalyst, and what we do, we all are fully aware it's so important for us to do that collaborative leadership and to work with the proximate leaders on the ground. And how do we get more of those proximate leaders involved in Catalyst? And part of that leadership piece, having those diverse voices, there's a lot of decision making that's made collaboratively, shifting and changing those mindsets. And I think this piece of convening as an honest broker is super important to our work, is that we have to convene together as honest brokers and work together and build that really intensive trust in the work that we're doing so that people know that we're doing the best that we can. And the only last slide I wanted to show was the systems work of social change. If you haven't gotten the chance to see that book, Francois Bocchini and Cynthia Rayner wrote that book. It came out last year, so it's really relatively new. And we'll put the link in the chat on how you can access the book. But we wanted to go ahead and stop talking and start asking those questions. and getting for all of you to help engage with us and help us learn as well. So any questions from the field, you can raise your hand, unmute, ask them. I'll monitor the chat real quick.
Debbie, we do have a question. Billy said, is the system approach referring to living system or a more stagnant system?
Definitely, we would want it to be the living system, right? And so the living systems approach is important. Gisela, you smiled. Do you want to take the rest of that?
No, I think the question is interesting, but I mean, I had the practical experience. I think Claudia is the person to, because for me the system is a living system, because it's how things are now. I don't know how we can have a non-living system. Claudia.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Considering, at least from my perspective and from the people that I work with perspective, when we think about systems, we think about people and or nature, or people and nature, and all these elements are living elements. We can go further, and I don't know if the question is about that, but we can go further and spiritually involve also other entities in our systems. But all of those entities are living entities. They have a living characteristic. So I would tend to say that we do have, whenever we have a system, we are talking about a living system.
Thank you for the responses from all. And I think my where I'm coming from about the living system is more about the changes. Like a lot of the situations, a lot of the leverage points, stakeholders, they change. Like I think if you look at a country level, I think I read a case study that the person who is working with a policy level change. However, I think in Ireland, the person was the founder of a nonprofit, is a professor and also a founder of a nonprofit called Well-Being Economics. And you probably already heard about her. And she said the changes in the government ministry levels is actually one of the roadblocks for them to make effective policy changes. Because if people, the people they've been working with for a few years, they suddenly changed to a new administration, then they have to start everything from the beginning. So that's like, then you cannot just like, I think one of your sites also says you cannot just copy and paste. It's not cookie cutter approach, right?
Yeah.
You have to look at this system as something constantly moving and changing. There's always little things here and there, even if it's not like a big administrative level change. There's still small things that are changing all the time. And how do you leverage your approach to adapt to those changes? Even, which means maybe in your cycle, you need to kind of go back to one step and go forward 2 steps, or something like that approach may work better than strictly follow that cycle.
Yeah, the point here, the systems are always changing, because we as people, we are always changing and evolving. So the systems are constantly evolving, and we need to start asking questions. For instance, in the example that you were sharing with us about these public workers that are more difficult to to help in the change or get involved in the change, we need to have them. And sometimes we need to have what we can call a regime agreement, where you bring different parties together and say about this question, it doesn't matter who's going to be the winner of the next election, we agree that we are going to do this change. And this can happen and happens in different situations in the state of Vermont, in the US, in Guatemala. We had these examples, concrete examples, where we overcome that limitation. So yes, we can overcome that kind of limitation, but we need to bring everyone to the same table.
Great. James, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Very interesting presentation. I have a question that relates to an initiative I've been driving for almost, well, more than 20 years. And I've made an enormous investment. I had the great fortune of having an early unicorn internet company win that allowed me to dedicate that kind of time and many millions of dollars to trying to solve what I'm quite sure is the biggest systemic problem on the planet that is holding back development and achievement of the SDGs, which is money. The global monetary system is a complete disaster. And depending on which country you're in, you will relate to it better than others. And this is really a serious problem. Money has become an instrument of making money from money. And the financialization of the global economy that's happened over the last 100 years is absolutely, it's just a massive problem, and it's getting worse. And so we've been tackling it, and I'm very pleased to say we've created a solution that has now been validated and tested, and we did it. When I say we, I mean a whole bunch of extraordinary minds from around the world, 30,000 meetings with stakeholders. I mean, we have really done a lot of groundbreaking work, but you know, the environment is constantly changing, and the biggest problem, even though we get acknowledgement after acknowledgement that this solution is what the world needs more now than ever, you are always facing status quo, resistance to change, and these barriers to making change happen. No matter how much people nod their head, yes, they just don't want to take risks. And so, you know, mobilizing systems change people around the world, to me, is got to be an important priority for us. What is the best way to do that?
I don't know, Debbie, Gisela, do you want to take this one, or do you want me to take this one?
I think we don't have. I think we don't have one answer. I think Catalyst is a good platform for that. And what I would say, I would suggest you to engage and get in touch with any one of us here speaking, and maybe making an working group, and we go deeper to the solution you have built and how this can be done, because we have even working groups on system change of many things. I was just in a session about taxation. I mean, we are discussing what Debbie tried to show at the end is that we are addressing, as social entrepreneurs, we are more than 3,000 social entrepreneurs, right? So, and we are working voluntarily to address the ecosystem and to find these leverage points that Claudia was talking about in our expertise, right? And so I'm not the one, because I work with nutrition, but we do have people here that could interact with you. That's my.
Yeah. And I'll definitely follow up with you, James. I'll follow up with you, James, because I think there's a lot of things that the donor relations team is doing, trying to shift. But I think you have some really interesting insights if you're not already on that team. Claudia?
Yeah, I was also thinking about the question you have, and I have more questions, James, and I would love to hear from you what you've done until now. And the first question is how much the traditional money or financial system is involved in the process of creating this solution. And we do not have the time to go and have an open this conversation, but I'm very curious about how the traditional guys, the bad guys, are involved in this process.
Yeah.
And this is something that is critical, and we need to bring them to this process.
I won't go into it in any detail because we don't have the time, but when I said 30,000 meetings, it includes the leading banks in the world, central bankers. I mean, we have many of the stakeholders that you would consider the biggest companies in the world, 600 of them. Again, many of them you could look at from a, kind of holistic environment standpoint as the enemy, but we don't see it that way. We see that is a collaboration, win-win for all parties. Because if you can prove economic conditions by unlocking the world's unused capacity, which is what this solution does, because capacity was one point the money of the world. Let's go back to capacity being the money of the world, because that's what it is. And Africa then is wealthy. They just don't have any money, as we know money today. But we just need to turn around what money is and what money was and what money needs to be. And anyhow, yeah. So
It's
really
amazing. Let's get in touch. Maybe I think you have the means to contact James, right?
Yes, absolutely. I'll follow up with you, James. That's wonderful. We wanted to close the session. Thank you all for joining us. I know we're going to the plenary session right now. It's going to be amazing. So there are some donors involved with that one. So we'd love to have you there, James, and everyone else. So have a great afternoon, evening, morning, depending on where you are in the world. And hope you can join a few more sessions before Catalyzing Change Week ends this week. Thank you so much, and take care all.
Well done.
Thank you. Thank
Jason
you.
had to
Thank
beat
you all
Cameron,
for
I think.
joining.
Take care.